All right, we're going to be breaking down the Bristol dirt track race in this one here. We're going to be talking about really the track in general and maybe how I foresee both the races going, not necessarily driver picks and things like that. If you want those types of videos, wait for later in the week. Check out our live stream, 10 a.m. on Sunday. Saturday, person and I are still trying to figure out what time we want to do that with how the heat races are. And I mean, we'll figure it out. You know, I'm recording this Monday, so we got a lot of time to work and figure out how we want to do everything. But we're going to hop in and just start talking about Bristol. So bring up things that I want to talk about and focus on. So let's get right into it. If you want to support me, go to BrandonCruzDFS on Patreon. You can join this month or wait till the start of next month. Whatever you want to do, I'm fine with that. And we're just going to go ahead. I'm going to be doing a lot of talking here. So if you don't like videos that aren't necessarily about NASCAR DFS picks, you can close out. I understand that. This is more talking about the whole Bristol race, and I got quite a few slides we're going to talk about here. Just things that I've seen from the Bristol Dirt Nationals and how the track is going to perform and things of that nature. So let's get right into it. Brandon, why are we listening to you? What are you doing here? Well, for those of you that aren't familiar with me or don't know me or just found me, and this is also why I was on that screen to begin with, because you can't really see me. I disappear. It's also raining right now, so if you hear thunder or anything like that, that's why. But I was a part, and I still go and help Donovan whenever he's still racing. But from 2015 to 2017, 2018, I was helping out Donovan Ulley and Jimmy Ray, the person you see in the picture here, the driver, helping him in his shop, helping him week to week at the racetrack, Southern New Mexico Speedway in Las Cruces. I helped Donovan Ulley at the El Paso Speedway Park, and then at the new Vado Speedway Park in Vado, New Mexico. And so that's what I did for multiple years. I was at the track, at the shop, weekends, everything like that. That's pretty much all I did towards the end of high school and exiting high school, was just be at the race shop, be at the racetrack. That's all I did. Help put on bodies. Didn't really help with the motors a whole lot, know what they did, but that's what they were doing. I was more interested in body work, suspension work, getting cars set up, doing tire prep, things of that nature, and everything like that. So I'm literally taking a victory lap here, not once, but twice. So I would like to say I'm knowledgeable on this, and I'm trying to take everything I can and just explain how bad I think the Bristol Dirt Nationals are going to be. Let's go ahead and get right into it. So typically, a dirt track, usually, unless it's, specifically like this race to where they're trying to find an exact type of clay that looks good on TV. And you're like, what are you showing me here? Don't worry, I'll get through it. Don't worry. This is just an example here. So typically, the way dirt races on most dirts is when it gets packed in, it really just combines on top of each other. Okay, and I promise, I know it looks ugly, I know it looks weird, this is just an example. Typically the dirt gets packed on top of each other, and so when the cushion starts to form, when they start driving on top of it, it'll keep like shaving off the very top of the dirt, create a cushion on top, things of that nature. Or whenever ruts and bumps, and whenever somebody says, oh, the track is rough, it's usually because, it's being packed in like this, because the whole thing's together. Well, the clay that they're using at Bristol is a really interesting clay. Like, it'll still produce dirt, but it won't produce it as much as normal, and it looks like this, okay? The way that the clay is at Bristol this week, the way that it packs down, the way that they track prep it, it almost goes in like Legos, like distinct layers. And I'm not talking about, they put the sawdust on the bottom. I physically mean the track itself. Like the top of the race and surface is like layers. And so whenever you see the cars really form a cushion or create ruts or dry it out and things of that nature, it really flakes off like a bunch of Legos, literally in layers. And you can see it in pictures. When we get through the slideshow some more, you'll see what it's doing at Bristol. But this is how it's different than a normal dirt track. That's why it's going to look weird. That's why I don't like what they chose here. I think that Bristol made a lot of decisions that I'm not a big fan of, and that I don't think is really going to help put on a good product. Anyway, I just want to bring that out there. This is not, a typical dirt track type of soil that they're using here. They're using a really specific clay, and whatever, people don't care about that anyway. One thing that you may not really consider whenever it's a regular race, and don't necessarily pay attention to the arrows that just pit entry and pit exit on the two lanes. One thing you don't necessarily pay attention to when Bristol is not covered in dirt is that the turns are different radiuses or different sizes. So turns 1 and 2 is a much tighter corner than 3 and 4. very slightly, but this is huge when it comes to dirt because you're not on the asphalt. You're on dirt. The way they packed it in, turns 1 and 2 is a completely different animal than turns 3 and 4. We got to remember that going in. So let's continue on. Imagine this is Bristol, okay? Obviously very simple. So this is the banking in a corner. This is the apron in the corner. What I thought they would do, and also, before people ask me, they've added a lot of dirt, okay? The inside wall that you see at Bristol this weekend, that's actually barriers put on top of the original inside wall. So they've put a ton of dirt on there. So I just want to get that out of the way. The way that I thought would put on the best show, and if you've seen the video that I made preseason talking about Knoxville and Bristol, I was really praising Bristol. I was really looking forward to this race. I thought they would put in the dirt like this. Straight up from the top of the racetrack to the bottom of the racetrack. No apron, just keep it at a constant angle. That's going to help guys maintain the corners. That's going to help guys get through the corners easily. You don't have to fight the car. You don't have to turn right a whole lot. Obviously, you're on the dirt, so you're counter steering. But you don't have to necessarily make the car enter the corner, go left, and then turn back up the track. You can just easily go through it. That is not what they did. This look at Bristol. This is what they have. They basically made an apron on Bristol. And what it does is it forces the cars, when you naturally enter a corner, obviously the banking is going to push you towards the inside of the corner, whether it's an interstate, whether it's a racetrack, dirt track, whatever the case may be. Well, now since they added this apron here, you have such a high degree of banking here, and then you hit the apron, and it wants to spin you around. And they saw early in practice, not with the Bristol Dirt Nationals, but the weeks prior when they were having private practice sessions, all the drivers would end up running the very bottom here and running their left sides on the apron, almost kind of like Atlanta in a sense, because that would actually keep the car under them. That was basically the way they were driving it. Well, Bristol wasn't a big fan of that. They were like, okay, you're not using the real racetrack here. We don't like this at all. So they've added a bunch of mounds of dirt on the bottom. So the racing surface is this really thin angle, this really thin racing surface. And as I get through actual pictures, you'll see more. So, what are these arrows on the screen? What am I looking at? And don't worry, I've censored them so they don't find me or anything like that, despite the fact they've helped given me almost 105,000 views. These stock cars are not going to act like the late models. They're not going to act like the modifieds. They're not going to act like the other stock cars that we saw. Maybe you can look at the stock cars a little bit, but the Cup cars are going to be running with far more horsepower. The Truck Series are going to be running with far more horsepower and far more weight, okay? The modifieds that we saw, Crafton running and guys like that, even late models, you know, they're roughly around 2,500, 2,400, 2,600, 2,700, 2,300, depending on what series you're in, what amount of weight you can use. But these Cup cars are pushing 3,400 pounds, okay? The trucks are a bit, they're 3,400, 3,500, maybe it's 33, either way. They're almost 1,000 pounds heavier than anything they ran at Bristol this last weekend. Now, why is this important? Because these Cup cars, their chassis are not designed to get sideways. You know, the dirt cars are specifically designed to react to the corner, to get the rear axle to go underneath the chassis in the corners. These Cup cars are not. The rear tires are locked in place. They're not going to move along with the track. So it's just a brick flying through the corner. And we're going to see this a lot in practice. I'm going to pay a lot of attention to practice, sure. I want to see top 10 speeds like that, but I really want to see what these guys are doing in heat races. Not necessarily who's faster and who's not, but who's able to actually enter the corner correctly. So these cars are going to do one of two things when they first unload. They're either going to want to push towards the wall because they do not have grip, or they're going to want to over-rotate and either hit these dirtles, which is what they're calling it. What is this? Are we 7? Whatever. They're either going to over-rotate and spin out, even in the corner, or they're going to go to the wall. And if you want to see examples of this, just go see my video that I put on my YouTube channel. The wrecks are there. You can just see how these cars are reacting. Those are cars specifically designed for dirt. These cars, it's like if you took your own sedan or whatever into a corner and you're having to yank it sideways, and you have to keep it sideways enough for it to maintain speed, but if it oversteers, you're going to spin out. If it understeers, you're going to the wall. There's two distinct lines. The line that your car is wanting to run is this blue line. So when you enter the corner, specifically in turns 3 and 4, because it's bigger, you're heading straight, like it's going to rotate. You're going to head straight towards the inside lane, straight towards the inside lane, and then you're going to want to come right back up against the wall. That's what you want to do. Now, I don't know how these stock cars are going to do it. I don't know how these cup cars are going to do that, because the street stocks that they were running here, even some of the modifieds, were having issues maintaining that corner. Like that, the cars are just wanting to slide down the apron and hit these white mounds of dirt. And so the drivers, when I said you don't want to have to oversteer mid-corner, the cars are basically diamonding down or coming down to the very bottom of the track. The drivers are having to bring it back up the track and then turn back down again. So it's basically almost kind of like, let's say for people who aren't familiar with it, it's almost like Indianapolis, where you have turns 1, 2, 3, and 4, but you almost have a straightaway, or you have a straightaway in between the two corners of 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. It's basically how they're having to approach Bristol. You have your initial turn in, and then you hit the center of the corner, and you almost have to turn it again towards the exit. And so the entry, the center, and the exit of the corner is where we saw all the wrecks during the Bristol Dirt Nationals. People either colliding into each other, running two different lanes, people sliding up the track, people hitting these inside dirtles. That's how it is. Now, I brought the green line up is because what I was seeing is that, or what I see in this race, is a lot of the fast laps are not going to be run by the leader. That's typically not how this past week was, especially once they get lap traffic. Usually whoever's running fast laps is just whoever's fastest on the track. And I don't think that's necessarily going to be the leader, because the leader is just going to be, it's going to be decided by who, I believe, passing points, and then, I mean, look, I'm not concerned with the pole sitter. Whoever I think is going to run fast is just going to run fast. Where was I going here? Oh, yes, the two lanes. So the way to be fast here at Bristol is almost to have a late corner and then turn sharp once you get about the apex of the corner, of the natural corner itself, and then just cut it down. Exit low, use the momentum that you get from coming down the apron and pass guys down the straightaways. That's typically how we saw guys passing this week. This is a very one-lane racetrack. The only way that you got by people was you moved them on the bottom like old-fashioned Bristol, or you entered the corner late and passed them down the straightaway by entering this lane. Anyway, so let's get into things that actually kind of matter here. So, as I just said here, if you're running two different lanes, if you're exiting at drastically different places, and this picture is a bit exaggerated because it's a drone cam, but everybody's wanting to enter the corners right towards the wall. You can't enter the bottom in any of these cars, late models, whatever. These cup cars, these trucks are not going to want to do that. If you enter right on the bottom, you're just going to push right up the track into the field. So everybody's going to be fighting for the high side entering the corners. That's not going to be good at all, especially in a one-lane racetrack. It's not going to be good at all. So everybody's going to be aiming for basically the top side of the corner. That's all it's going to be. So we're going to see a lot of contact down the front straightaways in the corner. Like, there's going to be a lot of contact in this race. I want to bring up this because this is a picture during the super late model main here. This is before the Hornets, before the stock cars, modifieds, and the 604 late models ran, because those cars really tore up the track, and I wanted to get an idea of what the track is going to be like probably 100 laps into the Cup Series race, and not necessarily looking at the worst of the worst, because that's just towards the end of the night. But you can see that this asphalt, I mean, it's just this asphalt, this dirt is just dried out, and they're watering the track before these races too, but this clay just packs down. It keeps the dust down, but it doesn't get muddy. The water just absorbs into the clay. It doesn't really change anything. So you see that this clay is taking on a ton and ton of rubber. And I'll talk about that when we get towards the end of things that were really popping up that people didn't think about: mechanical failures, tire issues during these races here, things that I think the Cup teams need to really pay attention to. But you're seeing that this thing is as hard as can be. The best way I can describe it is almost like a wooden floor, maybe in your house, or tile in your bathroom. It doesn't have grip, but it's hard as a rock. That's all this is. And these guys are sliding around. We'll talk about how the track is coming apart during these races as we get there. So this is turns 1 and 2. This is actually from Travis Brown. I asked him to send this to me, Moonhead, on Twitter, if you're familiar with his broadcasts. He sent this right after the late model races, and you can actually already see the corners starting to come apart. So why am I talking about this? It goes back to you're basically having to drive these corners almost like Indianapolis, to where there's actually like 2 distinct corners in each corner. You have turn 1 to where you have the initial turn in, the car sits down, and it starts breaking up the entry of the corner. And then once you bottom out basically and get it going again, then you have to turn left again, and the car yet again digs into the exit. So, and these are huge, huge holes. I know they look small, but look, this late model is about the size of a regular car, okay, regular cup car. We'll just say that as an example. Look how big these are. These are like car-sized potholes, car-sized rivets, and they're not necessarily just, a hole. They're, like I said, layers coming up. So it's not necessarily just a hole, it's just, layers of the clay coming up. You can also see the cushion really isn't a cushion because of that. Naturally, a normal cushion would be, one that's kind of fluffy. I guess you could use that word, kind of fluffy but dense. Here, it's just those like Lego bricks of the clay sliding up the tracks. There's not even really a cushion. There's not really a second lane. You can ask a lot of the drivers. You can look at a lot of the videos last week. This is a one-groove racetrack. Anyway, let's look at, this is bad. And Bristol can't do anything about it. This is the clay they chose. They're not going to order more clay. They've put a crap ton of it down. And you can see how big these mounds of dirt are. If the regular dirt cars can hit these, and then you see they have suspension issues, you can see that it shoots them up the track. If a cup car or a truck hits one of those, even without the spoiler, it's going to mess some stuff up. But these are gigantic holes. This is on turn 1 and 2. Yet again, thank you for Travis Brown for sending me this. And then you can also see, just another huge pothole in turn 2. So not only do the teams have to set up a car to run on basically tile. That's how this clay is. I think I forgot who messaged me. They were asking, "Oh, it looks like the dirt's disappearing. They're back on the concrete or asphalt." I'm like, "No, man. This is the dirt. This is how densely packed the dirt is. That's how this clay is acting. It's not necessarily dried out. It's just that's the clay that they chose." So you're having to set up a car that's going to be extremely unstable. Like, there is no grip at all. It's mainly just how loose can you make the car and still have the left rear bite. Basically, if you're unfamiliar, basically dirt cars are driven with the left rear and the right. They're driven with the throttle and rear wheels, but the way this race is turned into, they're going to have to get all the weight on the left rear. That's pretty much how it's going to be. So you got to do that. You also have to get the car ready to go through extreme suspension stress. During the Dirt Nationals, we saw a ton of front suspensions break and fail. We saw a lot of spindles break. We saw a lot of upper control arms, lower control arms break. Specifically in the right front, because that's where all the load is entering this corner, entering this high bank. I know these are late models, but for anything, the speed that you're carrying in and the weight against the car wanting to just go forward towards the wall, all that weight gets pushed on the right front. I don't know how. I would be shocked to not see a suspension failure at some point. Not necessarily a blown tire, but I think we're going to see something break in the right front of some cars this week. It may not be at the start of the race, but when you're doing this for 250 miles or 250 laps, that's hard on the car. That's hard on the suspension. Hoosier put out, and I don't have a picture of the, might be able to bring it up while we talk. Hold on. All right, I'm back. I had to find it. So this is from Hoosier. Hoosier Tires. Oh, but Brandon, they're running Goodyear tires this weekend. Why does it matter? Because this is interesting. So typically on a flatter dirt track, we'll talk about modifieds. At our lower tracks, we used to run, 11, 10, 9, sometimes even 8 pounds of air pressure in the left rear. The front, we would never almost get it past like 15 at any point. Look at the increase in air pressure on the right front. So what does this mean? So basically, the front tire is basically, a spring. It's like a mini spring itself. And so the bigger that gets, the stronger it gets, And so Bristol coming out and saying, hey, like after our testing, you're going to want that right front to be higher than you would normally run at any other track because of the stress that you're putting on the right front. Here, it's the same thing. I mean, I was very shocked to see them put this bulletin out saying that, like, hey, this is what we would suggest you guys run. Now, I don't know what Goodyear's going to do. Goodyear's bringing another tire that they haven't ran at Eldora. They're bringing it specifically for this race. I don't know what type of compound they're using there. But I wanted to bring that up. And another thing is that a couple of the guys who I knew were at Bristol, and even other competitors that were talking about it, was that they were seeing the tires start to blister. The tires start to actually chunk apart due to the heat that they were running. I guess Hoosier didn't expect this track to produce the type of heat that it did, specifically in the right front, left rear, or right front, right rear, and the left rear, due to how packed this track is. As I said before, it's packed down. You can see how much rubber is being put down on the track. The temperature on the tires are getting extremely, extremely hot. And so that's another thing you have to think about is tire wear. I mean, tire wear might actually be an issue here if Goodyear brings a soft compound, and you won't know in practice. That's something you can't find out in practice because the track, sure, it'll have practice laps on it, but it won't be as dried out. It won't be as worn in as it would be in that long cup race. So as we get along that cup race and tires start to get hotter and hotter and they're having to work more and more and they're constantly, just heating up against the surface of the dirt, that might be something we have to really look at. That's something we saw at Bristol is tires starting to chunk, tires starting to blister. I think that's something else that we have to look at this weekend. Continuing on, so we have cars that are going to be pushing or wrecking loose in the corners. We're going to have a track that is going to dry out extremely quickly and that is going to be loose as all heck. Like, this is basically asphalt at this point. It's asphalt, but it doesn't have the amount of grip that it does. So let's look at this track in general. Let's really look at it. So this is late in the night. This is the 604 class. And I basically took these to show you how flat and how smooth this surface is once the track gets packed down. I mean, you can see the reflections off the light. Look, I mean, you have the you have the cushion up here. You have what I would describe to you as almost layers of, you can physically see the layers of the clay, and then you see the part that's been packed down and ran on, and it's flat. I mean, it is flat. There is no moisture here that can be useful at all. Absolutely nothing. Single groove racing. So let's continue here. Obviously, you have the dirt. You can see how much, physical characteristics the dirt has, because obviously it's dirt. And then once you look at the race line, smooth as glass. Smooth as glass, because it's been packed down so much, because it's the type of clay that looks good on TV, but I think it produces absolute horrible racing. So if you look at the corners, I mean, absolute no moisture. You see how it's starting to come apart here. That's why I just call it layers, because it comes apart as like it would like an onion. We're basically talking about an onion here. It has layers. And running the bottom, which I think is about the only lane that's useful across the entire track. I know they were running different lanes depending on how the track was coming apart during this week, but I think the bottom lane is just where it's going to be at. I don't see the top lane prevailing at all, especially if you run so high. If you run the entire corner high, especially, and I think in a cup car, I don't think you're going to be able to maintain enough momentum to beat a guy who's running the bottom, because he could just beat you out of the corner, come back up next to the wall, and then dive it back down the corner, and you need to be basically side by side with him as you exit the corner. I just don't see that happening. So I think it's going to be a one groove racetrack that has absolutely no moisture in it at all. This is how the track looks with basically no one on there, and you can see basically where this car is running. I know it's under yellow, but that's the lane. They're hugging right at the bottom of that angle, right where the car is going to slide down, right next to those mounds of dirt that I talked about. That's why I was baffled that they did this, because the cars are just wanting to run the very bottom of the track here. There is no second groove. It's a one groove racetrack, and no amount of track prep or bringing in more dirt, which Bristol's not going to bring in more dirt within 2 days. no amount of track prep is going to change that. So it's a one groove racetrack. The bottom lane is preferred. The only way to pass somebody is around the high side and then ducking down to the bottom and trying to beat them on the inside. And then you're having to fight them entering the corner. It's going to be tons and tons of contact. Here's a great example of what the track looks like. I mean, is there any mud here? No. Is there any moisture here? No, not at all. Maybe way up here. But at that point, you're so high up, if you get into basically those Lego bricks that have been flung off, that's the cushion. It's basically just a bunch of marbles. You get up in the wall there. I mean, I'm so disappointed in how Bristol went at this. I don't remember how many slides I got left. Okay, yeah, so this is the last one. So I don't understand the idea behind this. I mean, this is just, I don't think it's a good racing surface for the Cup cars. I don't think it's going to be a good race. And so let's really talk about the Cup cars. I know Drew Blickensderfer, early in the year, this is like January when Race Hub came back, he was talking about the changes that the teams would have to make to the cars to get them to run, somewhat competently around this track. And he was even joking. He was like, man, I hope they let us reinforce the corner panels or the bodies or something because there's going to be contact in this race. And I completely agree. If you've looked at how any of the races this week at Bristol went, other than the very top mains, there was contact all over the place. There was fights on the racetrack physically and both in the car and like on foot. I mean, these cars are wild. This track is wild and fast. There's absolutely no grip. It's either you enter on the bottom, you slide up the track, or you're just fighting for that bottom lane. There's going to be contact everywhere. So we got to worry about suspension issues, entering the corner, how these cars are going to handle the track coming apart, because it's going to happen at some point. And if NASCAR, red flags or whatever, hey, that's on them. But you got to worry about that. You got to worry about how the cars are going to handle with the fenders being pushed in, basically, I mean, the whole body. I mean, it's the body's ridiculous at the racing that here. So if they don't let them reinforce it, that's going to be another issue. Oh man, I just went blank on what else I was going to bring up. I think that's about it. I guess you could talk about the safety or the crash aspects. So during the Bristol Dirt Nationals at the beginning of the week, all they were doing was, basically promoting the action, the flips, the crashes. Be like, heat number 1 got off a bit crazy because one car got upside down on the front straightaway. And then more and more and more cars would wreck. And then you'd have more and more and more serious injuries. And so pretty soon you had Racer XR, Racer RX, and Bristol Dirt Nationals. Hey, they started deleting all those pictures of the crashes. They stopped promoting all the crashes. And then as you got really later in the week, the last 3 days of the race, anytime there was a bad crash, they did not show replays. They did not show replays at all. As soon as it was a bad crash, camera panned away because we had tons and tons of injuries. I understand these are different cars, they ain't the Cup cars, but when you have that many cars and that many wrecks, it's the track. Come on. I know when you look at when they ran Dirt Bristol back in the early 2000s, it was the World of Outlaws, and they're going to run again in April. And so, yeah, you look at this event, well, anybody who had the entry fee or anybody who could pay the entry fee and drive to Bristol was able to race. Yes, that's true. So maybe the level of competition was a bit lower, but with all the wrecks, all the people getting injured, all the people being sent to the hospital, all the people having broken ribs, collapsed lungs, having to be cut out of cars. I mean, that's ridiculous. Go on, look. I don't have any because I already got my views from that. But if you look up the bad wrecks. I mean, all it is people enter turn 1 on the bottom. They get turned sideways and just reenact Dale Earnhardt's wreck into the corner. And they're flying down here stupid fast, entering the corner with concrete. I remind you, it's a concrete wall this week. I mean, I don't think we're going to see a Cup guy or anything get injured, but we're going to have a lot of crashes. Last thing with the crashes, because it's dirt and there's not a lot of grip, if they wreck, when they wreck, if it's in a corner You're either going to spin out on the bottom and slide up the track into people trying to avoid you on the bottom, or you hit the wall and come back down the track. It's almost as bad as Dover in a sense that it's a self-cleaning racetrack. Now, heaven forbid you have a crash on the straightaway, that gets short really quick. We saw a lot of those types of crashes too on restarts, or when a pack was coming down the front straightaway, one car gets sideways, blocked the field. So when you're looking at the Dirt Bristol race this weekend, and I'm trying not to bore a whole lot of people with a whole lot of information here, but when you're looking at the Dirt Bristol races this weekend, I'm not going to look at them as a super speedway because I don't think there's going to be a lot of big ones. It'll probably be an incident. It'll probably be a lot of little incidents with 2 or 3 guys, and then maybe one guy from each wreck being taken out of the race, or 2 or 3, but I don't expect, a big, maybe it could happen, but I don't expect a big 20-car pileup that takes out 15 cars. That's just, I don't see that happening. I would think that cars are going to be repaired in a time frame, so while there might be a lot of DNFs, it's probably not from one individual wreck. It's probably just a bunch of them stacking together. Last thing, why are they doing the cup racing heats on Saturday? Why don't they do them Sunday? Well, track president and NASCAR have agreed that, well, we're having the heat races Saturday because we expect a lot of contact for the cup cars, and we don't think if we ran the heat races on Sunday, it would give them enough time to repair the cars to do the race on Sunday. So that's why they're qualifying on Saturday and racing Sunday. I mean, that right there should tell you that even the sanctioning body of NASCAR, they agree that there's going to be contact, that there's going to be wrecks, people in the wall. So if you're building lineups, I'm not necessarily going to stack from the back, but I'm most certainly not going to play a lot of guys up front. Maybe a 4-2. I think a bunch of my lineups are going to be a 4-2, probably 5-1. Hell, maybe even a 6-6, depends on how many lineups I make. But I do expect there to be a lot of wrecks. And I think the Pro Invitational on Wednesday should have a lot of wrecks. Now, whether Tyler Hudson decides to throw a yellow, that's another thing. But I think it's going to be a wreck fest a lot this week. Practice, we're going to see a lot of guys get sideways in practice. Probably going to see guys get sideways in the heats, and we're going to see guys get sideways in the main events on Saturday and Sunday for the 2 races. So hopefully that helps you. I try not to go too in depth because I don't want to bore too many people. So I tried to use very easy analogies without using too many technical terms. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you later in the week. And if you have any questions, yet again, shoot them at BrandonCruzDFS on Twitter. And that's about it. Thank you guys for listening for half an hour. I do appreciate it.